welcome to this month's episode of Artists, Engineers, and Entrepreneurs right here from Hiller Measurements in Austin, Texas. You know, doing this show has been an absolute blessing for a variety of reasons. Number one, I'm getting to know you folks, but also I have been able to be exposed to some fascinating people that I would have never met before. And today, I'm going to introduce you to just one more of those, but not just somebody who's fascinating, but I think you're going to agree with me by the time we get done. This is an inspirational person that really has a message that so many people want to hear and need to hear. And we're right at the cusp of hearing what she's about to do this next year that is going to blow your mind. It's fantastic. You're going to love this episode. But before I introduce you to Nadia, check this out. At Hiller Measurements, we exist to ensure innovation works. We do this by designing customized electronic functional test systems and instrumentation for the world's most recognized and respected companies and governments. And they choose Hiller for our commitment to deliver quality at speed using Hiller Measurements flow control.
So quality at speed implies that we don't usurp or go around any processes, we expedite processes. We try to do the same things that our customer would do in their own companies, but do so in a way that is quicker, leaner, and with more visibility and transparency.
Our customers want to work with us because, first of all, we're very good at what we do. But maybe more importantly, we try to work with our customers as partners, understanding not only their written requirements, but really what are their overall goals for technical, their business goals, what is driving them. We go well beyond simply reading the letter of requirements and proceeding with the design. We work hand in hand as partners.
We are Hiller Measurements.
We are Hiller Measurements.
We are Hiller Measurements.
We are Hiller Measurements.
And we're back. So I told you a little bit about Nadia. Let me officially introduce you to my friend, a researcher, an astronaut in training, a canyoner. We're going to cover all of that and more. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Dr. Nadia Maarouf from the University of Calgary, joining us via Zoom, where it's snowy and cold and not that here in Austin. Nadia, welcome to AE Squared. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. I wish we were under the same room, but this will have to do
This will have to do as soon as your government allows the border to open. I can't wait to have you down here. And we're going to talk about you coming down to the United States here shortly along the way. So I have to share with you, and for our audience, you may not know this, I actually was following Nadia on LinkedIn for a number of months, quite frankly, because the things that she was posting about what she's doing in pursuit professionally as well as personally, it just gripped me. And so I was so excited to get a chance to meet you, albeit remotely like this, and get a chance to hear and tell your story. So this is going to be an exciting, exciting time. So we talked a little bit earlier a bit, and I was hoping maybe you could share with our viewers a little bit about where you grew up, because if you remember when we talked, I couldn't figure it out. But you have a fascinating story.
I made you do some guesses.
So tell us a little bit about your younger years.
So I was born and raised in Morocco. That's North Africa, just underneath Spain. A lot of people don't know where Morocco is because it's relatively a small country. Right. I was born to a father that was in the military, and my mom was managing laboratories for a geology lab and science of soils, basically, because Morocco relies a lot on agriculture. So that was a big important topic to work on. I have 5 brothers, so I grew up with brothers, and my family always treated me the same as my brothers, or even more. Like I had opportunities, I had a lot more opportunities than my brothers, for sure, just to kind of like fill the gap and be a little bit stronger. Yes, and so after that, after I finished my baccalaureate, my high school diploma, moved to the UK. My brothers have been studying in the UK, so it was kind of a natural step to take. And then I did my bachelor's in biomedical sciences at Oxford Brookes University. And then after that, I moved to Scotland and I did my master's in clinical pharmacology just before moving to Canada and doing a PhD in cardiac sciences here at the University of Calgary.
So when you were in Morocco about ready to leave, what did you have in your mind that you were going to do? What were you aspiring to do? Because that's a bold move culturally in Morocco for you to step out like that.
To be honest, Jeff, at that time I was 17 and I was very, very much involved in sports and competitive sports in Taekwondo. So that's a sport that I was practicing since I was 4 years old. I think we talked briefly about my coaches. Whenever I go back to visit, they still tease me that first time they met me, I was in nappies. And so that was one of the strategies for my dad, that I had to be able to defend myself if I had to. But Taekwondo, at least the Taekwondo style that I was practicing, was Olympic style. So it was more about competitions and scoring points and fitness. Some of it was about self-defense, but it was more about competition. And there were talks about me joining the Moroccan national team because I was doing really well in provincial and national competitions. So I was kind of hesitant, but also thinking about it, I realized that there will be opportunities that I will have in the UK that I would never have in Morocco. And I think looking back to it, I'm very, very glad that I took that step, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I didn't make that move.
It's fascinating. So you have a passion for Taekwondo and pick up a PhD on the side.
So I have to take a step back and take you through the steps that brought me here. So when I was an undergrad student, I think my parents valued education quite a lot, and so it was important for me to get at least an undergraduate education. That was the deal that we had. But they also knew that I was good at Taekwondo, and I was doing really well. Even when I moved to the UK, I joined the university team. I was made a captain within 2 months of joining the team. And from there, I was basically year after year, I was winning national competitions for the British Taekwondo Student Federation. I wasn't a good student back then. For my undergrad, I didn't do really well. I graduated with honors, but it was like the most basic honors degree you will get. And so there was a lot of skepticism about me actually going and pursuing a graduate degree after that. I was planning, like in my final year of undergrad, I was planning to go to Korea, because I was spending every summer of my undergrad in Korea, basically just training. And fixing some of my techniques, because again, going back to Morocco, we didn't have the funding or the training opportunities that some people will have in Western countries. For example, accessing masters from Korea, for example. I didn't have that until I moved to the UK. So I was a good fighter. Like I won competitions, but my moves, my tactics were not good. So I had to, every summer when I met my master in the UK, Master Sukion, who unfortunately passed away from a sudden cardiac arrest, his goal was for me to correct some of these moves and become a better fighter. So I would finish my exams, and then I would move to Korea or move to Hungary for fight camps, and then I won't come back until literally like few days before the semester started. And during the week, I only did the bare minimum. Looking back at it, I don't know. I actually don't regret it, because I had experience that other people that might have done a lot better than me didn't have. So it was a little bit challenging to get accepted into a master's program and then eventually a PhD. But I think universities now look at people that are well-rounded and that had other experiences as well.
In this period of your life, as we discussed before, tragedy struck.
Yes.
And and this is something that I was very moved by, about how you use tragedy to direct your life in a positive way. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So as I was saying, during my final year of undergrad, the plan was that I would finish undergrad and then I was free. I was free to actually move to Korea. That was the plan that I had with my master. He actually already arranged everything for me to move in early week of June at that time. Unfortunately, he had a sudden cardiac arrest in February that year, and that was like the first hit, the first kind of like pause and think of what you're doing. I was doing so many things at that time. I was training basically with people who are like full-time athletes. I was going to Manchester, I was going to Bristol, I was going to London. I was
Wherever.
like traveling 4 or 5 times a week, sometimes just to train for 4 hours and then get back to Oxford and go to school the next day. And then that summer, I was actually in Korea when I received a call that my dad had been hospitalized. And I think, as I was saying, my dad growing up was like my Superman.
Right.
There was nothing that he couldn't do. He was well respected in the community. He did a lot to help a lot of people, and he was also like my biggest supporter. Like he was a kind of a strong individual, but also like a fair and helpful person. So, and then I went back to see him, and he was in the hospital ready for surgery. Luckily, I made it on time. And so for his first couple of heart attacks, they were able to put in stents and help him. He had angioplasty. And so instead of actually going back to Korea, I decided I had like a couple of weeks, and I talked to my mentor at that time from Oxford, and I said, look, I'm actually thinking to pursue a master's degree. And he was happy, because he was all the time telling me during my undergrad, Nadia, if you just come to class, like, you will do really well, because I have never seen a student who actually just comes to class when they absolutely have to and never fail any classes. So I never failed any classes, but it was just the bare minimum. And so he was happy to write a reference letter for me, as well as another professor. And I had applied to like 10 or 14, I think it was 14 universities, and I got rejected in every single one of them, except the one university that was like, oh, I'm just going to apply, but there's no chance I'm going to get in.
Right. And you were specifically looking to do a master's in what?
In clinical pharmacology.
There we are.
For me, it was personalized medicine. I really enjoyed that topic in undergrad, and for me, it was important that we prescribe drugs to people, not to the mass of people, not one size fits all. I already had that kind of thought implanted. I've been told by other professors that I asked for reference that, oh, there's no chance you're going to make it to a master's degree. You have a third-class honors degree. There is absolutely no chance. Right. And they were right. Like, I was rejected in all the universities, kind of like the I would say mid-class to lower class universities. I applied to all of them that had a pharmacology department and pharmacology masters, except this one, which is the University of Glasgow. And it's so famous for its clinical pharmacology department, for its pharmacology and medical department. They are some of the best. They're like right behind Oxford and Cambridge. And so when I realized, okay, now I have a chance to pursue a graduate degree, and I stopped everything. I stopped training. I focused 100% on this degree, and I graduated with a distinction. So you have to think about, I don't know how to emphasize it, but going from a biomedical degree to a clinical pharmacology degree, I was actually one of two of class of 22 that were not physicians or pharmacists. That master's was meant to be for clinicians to become more specialized in personalized medicine. And actually, one of my profs in Glasgow as well, Prof. McInnes, who became a really important mentor for me, just looked at me and he said, "You're just an experiment. We've never taken a chance on somebody like you. We'll see. You're just an experiment." And he did say that in front of everybody, and I was just like, "Uh-oh, I've got my eyes on me. Like, I better do well."
So what changed? What Taekwondo? Your focus, what changed? Because this is a hockey stick moment.
I think seeing my father being vulnerable, really changed something for me forever. It really did change. I think it just made me grow up overnight. And also the surgeon at that time, I was asking a lot of questions because I was like, wow, some of these topics we touched on during undergrad, but I wasn't there. I was thinking about, my train is going to leave at 3 p.m. and this lecture is going to go until 2. So how am I going to get to the train station? That moment I will never forget. I'm actually thinking about it right now, just seeing my father being vulnerable, somebody that was, like I said, was my rock, my Superman, just made me realize, okay, you should do something to prevent other people having to go through this. And I'm just going to say this, kind of like move a little bit forward, but about a year after that, my dad, just as I was finishing my master's, he was misdiagnosed with Parkinson's, and it was actually ALS. So he was put on medication. Again, this is somebody who just finished a master's in clinical pharmacology and personalized medicine. And he was misdiagnosed and prescribed medication that was not good for him. He was taking levodopa that was actually toxic. So his ALS was kind of like speeded up. But it was not the ALS actually that killed him. It was another heart attack. We already knew that the stents that he had, because he had diabetes and he had prostate cancer, for example. So it was not good for him to have the drug-eluting stents. It was just a bare stent, and it was restinosed. So basically, it was being plugged again, and there was nothing that can be done. If they were to stop his anticoagulants to put in another stent, he would bleed out.
Would have bled out. Yeah.
So it was another heart attack that unfortunately took his life. But I think throughout, him being diagnosed with a terminal illness eventually just also really, really made me think about, you can have the best physicians in the world, and he did. And some of the physicians I'm so grateful for, like for being there for him, like when it was terminal, just making sure that he was comfortable, and he was as comfortable as he can be. But it's also not good enough. Like for me, the importance of research and innovation just was highlighted in big letters. That there was a time in my life that I really wanted to be a physician, and I think it was always in the back of my mind. I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna go become an Olympic athlete, and then after that, when I am old and I have injuries, then I can go back to medical school. That was my plan. And research was just put at the forefront. Yes, I still want to be a physician, but I don't want to just be a physician that just prescribe drugs and basically give people death sentences. I wanted to be a physician that prescribes drugs, but also help to change the guidelines and bring new solutions and keep bringing new innovations to help most people.
And you're doing that now.
I am.
Yeah. So tell us about your research, and then we'll talk about how that has led to possibly a whole new career.
Absolutely. So again, I took a year actually after, not a full year. When my dad was diagnosed, I knew it was going to be terminal. So I was applying for PhDs at that time, and I had few options to do a PhD in the UK. I had actually, I think, 3 or 4 offers from the UK, and I had one from Chicago as well. So for me, it was important that I do a PhD in the right topic, the topic that kind of like lit my fire. For me, it was prevention of cardiovascular disease. And so I applied to a few places. I had a few options, but like not all of them were going to satisfy my curiosity. And also, if you're doing a PhD, things will inevitably be hard. And so you have to remember why you started. You're not just doing a PhD because it looks good. You have to remember
know your why.
Yeah, and I'm glad I did, because I ran into a lot of issues during my PhD. When you're doing experiments, it doesn't work, and it just gets exhausting. Like sometimes you're thinking, why am I doing this? Like I shouldn't, it's just like a waste of time. I keep doing things and it doesn't work. So I ended up working with one prof that we worked on calcium channel blockers. That project didn't work out. I had to switch labs for many reasons that I'm not gonna touch on right now. Prof moved to another university, and I ended up actually, that was another that was another positive thing that came out of a not so positive situation where I ended up working with the chief of cardiology here, Dr. Ed O'Brien, who supervised my PhD project, and he's working on preventive cardiology. So it kind of just worked out perfectly, just aligned really well. I ended up designing an experiment that was basically using a protein that we all have called heat shock protein 27, and it's usually traditionally seen in kind of, it helps with the misfolding and unfolding of proteins. It helps proteins like stay in shape and functional. But it also showed, yeah, exactly. But it just showed to be an atheroprotective protein. It's an anti-inflammatory protein, and it's also a protein that helps reduce bad cholesterol in the blood by taking it to the liver for metabolism. So yeah, like I'm so glad I went through that. My prof gave me a lot of freedom to design and go through basically the whole process, you know, designing, conducting, analyzing, and publishing the experiments. And I learned a lot from that process, and I'm very glad I did.
Where did you see this experiment taking you? What was it that you were going to move the science and the understanding of cardiovascular health forward in this work?
So, so the students and the postdocs that have done some work before me have shown that this protein is atheroprotective. Atheroprotective means just protects from atherosclerosis, and atherosclerosis is what leads to heart attacks. So in my project, I was focused more on a little bit of a more complicated situation with this exact same topic, which is what happens to a population that has it the worst, which is basically women post-menopause, because they become worse than men after that period. So this protein that we talked about is a downstream foot soldier of estrogen. So this is why women pre-menopause, for example, are relatively protected from heart attacks, and men are more at risk. But then after menopause, it switches. Yeah, exactly. So I was working on that kind of difficult population to manage. And for me, by working on that population, you can actually extrapolate after. And if you were, again, going back to my personalized medicine training, if you were to just adjust the doses that you will give to men versus the doses that you will give to women, then eventually everybody will be protected. But it was always important to start with that difficult population, because then you can extrapolate. Everything else becomes a little bit easier when you work on that difficult population.
I found that interesting. Go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
I'm glad to say that my team have shown that it works in both men and women. And again, going back to some of my work, I could just see that if you were to adjust the doses, it will work for everybody.
So it's preventative care, basically, is what it would be.
So, like, for example, you would take an individual and you would look at their family history, for example. You would look at some of the other risk factors that they have, whether it's environmental or, lifestyle in general. And then you will measure their cholesterol. And then if they are at high risk, then potentially you can give them a vaccine. So we turn this into a vaccine, basically. You can probably give somebody like once a year. And it will reduce their chances of developing atherosclerosis.
That's fantastic, and to consider. So, are you in clinical trial with this, or is it still an R&D project? Where is that now?
It's still right now in the preclinical phases, but it's very promising. It's quite promising. My prof made a patent out of it, and he started a company in the US, and so. I am actually very excited to see, hopefully again, it's research, so we never know. I'm very excited to see the time when it makes it to market and everybody can benefit from it. But it's still in the preclinical trials. So what I worked with was in transgenic animals. So these are animals that are genetically engineered to show the disease. So if it works on them, it's a model, right?
So I found this interesting when we chatted, when we first met. we had a conversation about this issue, and you were sharing with me this rather unique model experimental place, which is looking at the heart health of astronauts that spend extended period in space, which ties into this and takes us to the next chapter in your story. Could you share a little bit about that? Because I found that fascinating and troubling, especially as we consider, you know, possibly going to Mars in the future. How does heart health play into that?
Oh, absolutely. So I remember when I was preparing for my candidacy exam. So in Canada and in the US, you have multiple steps for getting a PhD compared to like European countries, for example. So when you're preparing for your candidacy exam, you have to do a comprehensive exam, like basically understand your project really well, but also understand, you know, the extension of it. How does it apply to other things? And so I came across a paper at that time that kind of showed the parallels between space travel and aging. And it kind of stuck in my mind, but honestly, it wasn't until I was invited to the Emerging Leaders Forum at the University of Calgary, and I happened to meet a former astronaut, Dr. Robert Thirsk, who was our chancellor, but he is also a retired Canadian astronaut. And so I was, I think, one of 7 or 8 people that were invited, and there was like mentorship interactions, and he asked me about my project, what I was doing, and I told him that I was working on a preventive cardiology project, and we talked about it a little bit more because he's a medical doctor as well as an engineer. And then he kind of like brought back again that idea that I had read a couple of years before about astronauts' cardiovascular systems aging by 20 years for every single 6 months period that they spend continuously in microgravity environments.
That's
so
incredible.
Yeah, it was like a light bulb moment for me that we have an aging population. Cardiovascular disease is basically when we talk about like the hardening of the blood vessels, that is an issue that arises from aging, but also some people are genetically predisposed to it. So even if they're doing everything right, they can still have cardiovascular disease. And so it kind of like it was a 1 + 1, you know, equals 3 equation, which doesn't make sense. But I was thinking, well, wait a moment, we will be trying to push the boundaries and go to, you know, missions beyond low Earth orbit, namely, you know, the moon and eventually Mars. We can't send astronauts to do those missions unless we solve the issues with other health challenges that we have. One of them is cardiovascular disease, and so it's a win-win situation. It was just like a light bulb moment that made me think, well, space, you know, working in the space sector, maybe becoming an astronaut, I don't know, but for me, it's very important that I contribute to those solutions.
Sure. So that leads, you're doing preclinicals on what could be a vaccine. Obviously, that vaccine, if you're an astronaut, and by the way, for our viewers, if you haven't seen, click up here on the top and check out our conversation with Greg Box Johnson. We love having astronauts on the show, so this is great. But
I really enjoyed it.
Yes, but it seems like the astronauts desperately would need this vaccine as much as anyone else. If you're talking about going to Mars and it's a 3-year mission, that's certain death without it.
Definitely. I mean, right now, there are obviously economic, political issues with why we are not in Mars yet.
Right.
But one of the most important reasons why we are not there, it's because of all the health challenges that we are facing. So cardiovascular disease is a small portion of it. There's of course, you know, osteoporosis. That's another example that I would like to talk about as well, which is like for adults that are over the age of 50, they lose about 1% of bone mass every year after the age of 50. But for astronauts in space, they lose 1.5% every month. And so downstream of that as well, you know, when you're losing bone mass, your red blood cells and your white blood cells are also being affected. And of course, when you have less red blood cells, that can lead to anemia. But even worse, as it applies to space travel, for example, when you have less white blood cells, you're more prone to infection, but you're also more susceptible to the bad effects of radiation. Again, that leads to cancer. So it's all like a big issue that you can say, for example, we will get, like, by miracle, we will get all the money that we need to, you know, build the rockets and have the technology to send us to Mars. But unless you solve those health issues, you can't go. By solving those health issues, you're solving health issues here on Earth.
Here, yes.
Yeah.
What a fantastic! I can't imagine that at 17, about ready to leave Morocco, that you envisioned that you would be doing this type of work.
No.
That's fantastic. I love that. But not only are you thinking about it, you are. While we're talking, we're showing video here and pictures. You're actively involved, shall I say, pursuing it, albeit more from the research angle, if I understand that correctly. And you actually have, you're scheduled for some active research missions coming up to help this our effort to go to the moon and Mars, starting with the one coming up here in the desert. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm share a little bit about that.
So I'm just going to go back a little bit. So I kind of like secretly applied for this same program back in 2017. That was before I met with my mentor at that time, and I didn't get in. I was still a PhD student. I didn't even hear back from them. So, but I finished my PhD and I applied again. And I was like, I'm just gonna apply again. Like, I didn't tell anybody again. I just applied. And then in 2019, I was accepted into this program. It's a Citizen Astronaut Scientist Candidate, which I passed in September 2019. When I was in Florida, basically just doing all sorts of like simulations and different activities that are associated basically with the space flight. But it's just the beginning. There's a long way to go. And after that, I did what's called the extravehicular activity simulation at the Canadian Space Agency. Again, that's with this program, and that was an amazing experience. That was one of the best experiences I've ever had. Basically testing a commercial spacesuit in simulation of microgravity, and in my case, it was lunar gravity. And we did Jupiter, and we did some other stuff just for fun. We had a bunch of really smart engineers and good machinery, so we were just like testing out different things. That was amazing. But it also, I think that experience just made me realize how important it is to look after your health and keep learning. Like, you should never stop learning. There's always something coming up, and you know, be a student for life. So the mission that's coming up, again, I applied, what is it called? It's the Space Medicine Operations, and it's going to be held in Utah in the MDRS, or the Mars Desert Research Station. This is the biggest Mars research station that is a high fidelity habitat. So it's totally off-grid. We will be using solar panels to power our batteries and everything that we will be using, you know, computers and things like that. We will be using some drones as well. I am the only, well, let's go back. I am the only female, the only Canadian in the crew. We have 3 Italians and 1 French crew members. Yeah, so I'm very excited for that mission, because we will be collaborating between engineering and medical sciences to test space healthcare autonomy. That's another big for us here in Canada, because we have a lot of communities in the north that don't have a lot of access to healthcare. And so my biggest, I'm going to be doing like 4 experiments, but my biggest experiment will be with healthcare autonomy. So we'll be testing some wearable technology to monitor health continuously, which is going to be also very important for space travel, because as you're moving further away from an Earth-centric system where, you know, something goes wrong with a crew member, you can just ship them and send them to Earth. That's not going to happen when you're traveling, you know, 2.5 years. So you have to keep a very close eye on the health of the crew, and it's going to be a little bit more autonomous, basically,
Right.
of a system rather than an Earth-centric one. So you have to kind of keep monitoring as you go every day.
Right. So are you playing the role of the in-flight doctor and using your other colleagues on this mission to be kind of watching and them try to take care of themselves, or how is that going to play out?
So I am going to be serving two roles actually for this one. I'm going to be both the medical scientist and the crew medical officer.
Okay.
And I've done some training for, to qualify for that. So I am going to be an experiment myself, but each one of my crew members are experiments too. So they will be using these smart garments to collect data. And I will also be collaborating with some of them to test the stress, task-induced stress, for example. So I'll just give you like a general experimental plan that we have right now. For example, we will be using drones when we are doing EVAs to see if we can achieve a task and how much stress would that generate compared to maybe using maps instead of drones to take us to a location. And also I will be testing stress in response to a rescue mission, for example, that we will have to do. This is just some of many experiments that we will be doing. I'm just finishing up the write-up of the ethics documents that we will be sending, and it depends how that goes. But I don't think there will be any problems because it's all it's non-invasive, except for a little blood draw that I will be taking from my colleagues.
Okay. Well, for our listeners to the show today, make sure that you subscribe to the show, because we're going to keep up with Nadia as she goes into this, and hopefully check up with her during and possibly after to see how the research is going. And that's going to be really exciting to watch you go through this mission. But it's not the only mission you have coming, correct? You have another one.
So I actually had other missions that I had planned for last year. Well, one of them was the spacecraft egress training, where you are simulating a crash landing and rescue after that. So self-rescue, and also potentially helping other crew members if they're experiencing issues, and also parabolic flights. So you're testing certain experiments in microgravity. That was going to be in Ottawa, and that was all cancelled. So this mission that is postponed until November was supposed to take part in April. Another mission that's coming up, and I would say just started a 12 weeks course for that one. So it depends how well I do in that course. It's an underwater analog mission as well. So that one is going to be in Croydon as well in the US. And that one will be simulating basically EVAs in space, because water is the best simulator for extravehicular activity in the vacuum of space. And so I'm very excited for that one. I'm learning a lot about, a little bit more about diving and decompression sickness and all of that stuff, which kind of like goes back to what you do all the time here.
Yes.
What you do on a regular basis that prepares you for opportunities that you are not even thinking about right now.
You have a fantastic hobby in this area, canyoning. I'd never heard of this before until I met you. So you have a high tolerance for very cold water. Does that play into this?
As an African, it's funny because I have a lot of few Canadian friends that look at me and they're like, "You're crazy." Yeah. I'm like, "No, I'm not crazy. I was tested." I would prefer cold than heat. For somebody that grew up in Morocco, sometimes it gets to like 45 degrees Celsius. It's unbearable. Like there's not much you can do in a 45 degrees Celsius, whereas in the cold, if you layer up, and that's something that I had to learn when I moved to Canada. Well, I did a little bit in Scotland. I actually started climbing in Scotland, both ice and rock, but it's not as bad as here, when it sometimes can get to like minus 35 in the mountains. So layering up, and also when you're moving, it's not as cold as it sounds because you're moving all the time. So your body is regulating temperature. It's a lot of fun. It's addictive. And also, like, for some of these trips, we are probably one of very, very, very few people that have ever been in that spot, because most of the people would just like go around. Like, you need to have rope skills and little bit of insanity, just a little bit of like mild insanity to like wrap down a 60-meter cliff to go
Right.
down that spot. Like, people would just want to look at it from the top. My mom asks me that all the time. She's like, yeah, I know that's beautiful, but why do you have to go there? I'm like, yeah, because I want to go explore it, because you see things that other people don't get to see, and
Right.
that's quite humbling. That's
Yes.
amazing.
That's inspirational. What do your brothers think of what you're doing now? Do any of your brothers
Funny.
follow in your footsteps this way?
No, my brothers, actually, I'm the black sheep of the family. So I have 5 brothers. I'm the
Yep.
only girl.
Yes.
But my brothers are not by any means as adventurous as I am. I sent them pictures. I just sent some of the canyoning pictures to my brother, and he's like, "You're crazy." So they are encouraging, they're supportive, but
Right.
they would never join me on these things. Like, my brother was like, "I will come visit, but we'll go skiing in a resort." And I'm like, "Where's the fun in that? Like, in a resort? Like, that's just boring."
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, no, they're supportive, but they would never join me on any of the activities that I do.
I find your story compelling for a couple of reasons. One is it's so clear how there are certain, they serially line up people that were milestone mentors in your life that helped you, didn't dictate your direction, but gave you the perspective to choose the direction on your own. And second to that, how you have turned tragedy. 2 of those mentors in your life suffered similar fates, and that the beauty in that is that it is out of that tragedy that you are adding the greatest value. And I just think that's such a fantastic story. And then to cap it off with quite possibly a future that could take you to orbit, if not somewhere else, in the name of pursuing that research, really speaks to keeping your eyes on the horizon, that you don't know where you might end up, but it could be fantastic. And it's so marvelous to hear your story and tell that.
I think it's just, for me personally, I really, really do enjoy everything that I do. Like, I'm not constantly doing something just because it will look good on my CV or anything. And if I was lucky enough to go to space, again, I don't want to go as a tourist. I don't have anything against it. I respect what the commercial spaceflight sector is doing. I think it's great. But for me, like, like, say, for example, if you were asking me, what is your ultimate goal? It would be to actually go there, do experiments, and bring those findings to contribute to solutions. Like, for me, that's how I define success, for example. But also, if I were never to fly myself, if I were just to contribute to the science, like, say, for example, the simulation missions that I have, they're simulation missions that may be just like 16 days in length, but they are a small piece of a puzzle that will contribute to more knowledge that will help people understand more. And for me, that is enough. That is great.
I had not considered how that could be so impactful for rural communities.
Oh, rural communities here.
Is...
So I will just give you an example. So we have communities in Yellowknife. Say, for example, somebody will have, let's just say, like an abdominal issue, but the nurses and the physicians that are up there, they're not fully trained, and they don't have equipment to fully diagnose what's going on with the patient. So most of the time, they will actually ship the patient to cities with bigger hospitals. Guess how much that costs, for example? That costs $50,000.
Just for transportation.
Just for transportation, for like say, for example, an air ambulance or like a multiple system of transporting the patient. And you're taking them from their community. They're feeling isolated. They're not. Their quality of life is not as good as if they were to be treated there and be sent home. And also, a lot of samples, for example, are also being shipped right now. So healthcare autonomy is very important for space travel, but think of all the benefits it's bringing back to us, whether it's in Canada or everywhere else. And one thing that it cannot escape my mind, because I've seen my dad being terminally ill, and somebody that really hated hospitals. So he wanted to be at home, although he was going to die any day. So when I think about healthcare autonomy, so instead of being in the hospital, basically just like hooked to different machineries and things like that, you can actually be at home while still being monitored. And that all adds to healthcare autonomy.
You are pointing at one of the what could be the most foundational applications of the Internet of Things that I've ever heard, listening to you talk about this.
Yeah,
That has
there's a
to
lot.
have crossed your research mind, right? I mean, the suit.
Oh, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely. I think it's very important. I think with our aging population as well, like with the patients that I work with right now in clinical trials, I know like sometimes because I'm doing research, I'm not limited by time. So I actually really enjoy working with them and hearing about their stories and because I follow up with them, every 18 months. So I kind of know them. I only have 165 of them, but I know every single one of them.
Sure.
And so a lot of them actually don't like hospitals. They don't like to be away from their home, right? Although they need it, they do still need that care. So for me to have, like, say, for example, this technology, when you have like smart garments that is monitoring patients that are sick, but they can still be at home and only intervene when you absolutely have to, is, I think, a solution that will be needed as our population is aging. We have more and more aging population going from here.
And the reduction in overall cost of healthcare that could come from that is profound.
Absolutely.
Profound.
Yeah.
Okay, so as our other guests know, when we've spent this wonderful time, I could talk to you for hours, but we want to keep it to an hour show. But I love asking this last question of all my guests because I sincerely hope that we get to keep up with you and visit with you again as we watch your ascendancy and wherever you're being led. If we have the opportunity, and we will, to talk again in the next 3 years, when you and I sit down to talk, what are we going to talk about has happened since today? What would you imagine we'll be talking about?
Jeff, how about we make a deal? Let's make it 5 years instead of 3 years, because
Okay,
I just want to
5 years.
Just want to have a little bit of buffer time in case, things are delayed or.
It will be a much longer discussion, but okay, 5 years.
Just say 5 years. I think I would want to be done with my at least kind of solid foundation education. I still have to go back to do another 3 years of medical school just to fill some of the gaps and also be ready for emergencies and be able to do more. So I will be done with that.
You're going to finish your MD.
Yes, yeah. I just have 3 years left. I may as well just get it done, and that way I can provide more. I can help more.
Okay.
But I will always be a researcher first. Just clarify that. Hopefully, I will have a mission assigned to me already. So I'm not sure. I think I would positively say I wouldn't have flown yet, but I would have a mission assigned. Right now, I'm still in training. As you can see, there are some astronauts that could be training for 13, 14 years, and they don't have a flight yet. But hopefully, in 5 years, I would have a flight assigned or a mission assigned, and I would be officially training for it, maybe full time. And also, I would want to see some more of the research activities that I am associated with being a little bit more fruitful, hopefully, and being applicable to people that I would never meet. I think that just makes me happy if I can contribute just 1% to some of the solutions to the world problems. Makes me feel like I am worth the oxygen that I'm breathing.
Well, that is going to be a fantastic discussion we're going to have. We're going to follow up with you while you're on mission later this year, if you will allow it, if not during, afterwards. And we look forward to bringing our entire audience along for the ride as we watch you head to space and serve communities across this world in healthcare. It is such an honor to meet you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And man, I'm telling you, I hope people who've heard this story find your journey one that inspires them to follow in their own footsteps, but parallel to yours. So
The
Nadia,
pleasure is
thank you.
mine, Jeff. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your wonderful podcast. And yes, I look forward to following up. Let's plan for something from within the mission. I think as an engineer, you might find that quite intriguing. Just see some of the systems we work with, etc.
All right, well, you heard it here first. We're going to go along for the ride with Nadia, so make sure you subscribe, ring the bell, do all that good YouTube stuff, podcast stuff, and whatnot, because we are sure to bring you Nadia's journey live from wherever she ends up, whether it's in Utah or underwater or in space. So it's great to have you along here on AE Squared. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. AE Squared is a Hiller Measurements Town Hall production. Copyright 2020. AE Squared is produced by Anthony Longoria. Production support by Christian Zamora. Hey friends, thanks for joining. Now I got to be real with you. You spend this much time with people like Nadia, Donald Reinertson, Heather Green, Daniel Robinson, Tammy Newcomb, all the guests we've had on AE Squared. It has an effect on you. It sure has on us. So we're going to take the next set of episodes and we're going to share with you how we've re-envisioned our own company based on a lot of what you and I've both heard together here on AE Squared. So make sure you subscribe and come along because Hiller is on the grow. We'll see you next time right here on AE Squared.